In today's episode, we're along with Daniel Cates in an Alpha 8 high roller tournament with a buy-in of $100,000. The blinds are $2,000 and $4,000, and the ante is $500. Cates is on the button, and Mercier limps pre-flop. Since Daniel is the chip leader at the table and he has position, he decides to limp with his mediocre hand. Cates completely missed on the flop, so when facing a bet from Mercier, the obvious decision is to fold. What could Mercier have with this board? If he has an ace with a big kicker, or even a pair of deuces, he would raise pre-flop. So it looks like Mercier may have a marginal hand, and he limped with the hope of not getting raised so he could see the flop. Also, Daniel knows that on this dry board with the ace and the king, it's easy to bet with any two cards, because Mercier knows that if one of the opponents has an ace with a big kicker, he'll probably raise pre-flop. Mercier also knows that if one of the opponents has a king, he can't call on too many streets because there's an ace on the board. With that in mind, instead of folding, he decided to float, which means he's calling with air trying to represent a big hand, in order to take the pot later on. More so, Cates knows that by calling, with a player behind him still to act, he can better represent a decent hand. The big blind called as well, and on the turn another ace showed up. While Cates can assume that it's less likely that Mercier or the big blind holds an ace, it's still possible, but the chances of one of them holding an ace is much lower now. And he knows that betting against two players behind him is always a show of strength. So when both the big blind and Mercier checked to him, he knew that by betting he could take the pot, even if someone holds a king. Especially Mercier, who's a bit short on chips and can't stand up to two bets on the turn and river, while he's only holding a king. Daniel has air, but he planned to float from the flop, so now he bets. After the big blind folds, the action comes back to Mercier, who is also a pro who knows a thing or two about poker. And he knows that with another ace on the board, it's also less likely that Cates holds one, even if he just called on the flop. If Mercier had more chips, he wouldn't fold to that bet, if he has a decent hand. But as I mentioned, Mercier is a bit short and can't face two bets, so he folded with the best hand.